Okay, welcome to the public information session on the referendum on the town of Pontry, sponsored by the town of Monroe. I'm not going to go through the whole history of this. We've gone through several public hearings with the county to get to this point. This isn't about what the county didn't do, or whatever. This is about, this is now here in the hands of the voters in the town of Monroe. And it's now up for us to decide whether this is something we want to do. And that's going to be largely based on financial considerations. And that's why we've placed a very heavy emphasis on finances and how that's going to work. And we were able to secure a firm that was able to do a pretty decent analysis in a very short amount of time to look at those numbers. So we're going to have them up first, and before we do that, I'm just going to go through some other quick announcements. The sessions are broadcast on Channel 22 live, and also will be rebroadcast. They'll also be posted on the town website, and that will be for both sessions. I'd like to introduce the elected officials that are here. From the town of Monroe, we have Supervisor Harley Doles, Acting Supervisor Tony Cardone, Councilman Rick Colon, and Councilman Jerry McQuaid. From the Village of Monroe, we have Mayor James Purcell and Deputy Mayor Irene Conklin on the dais here. Village of Harriman Mayor Steve Welly is here on the dais as well. Village of Kears Joel was invited. Unfortunately, they have religious observances this week. For the school districts, the Monroe Central School District sent a written response to the pre-submitted questions that were submitted last week. And the Kears Joel School District is also not able to attend because of religious observances. For I just
okay,
yeah. No interrupting, please. All right, the accounting firm of RBT, and representing them is Bill Cochran, Mike DeTuro, and Linda Hannigan, and they'll be presenting first. We have our town attorney, Brian Nugent, here, and for United Monroe, we have Chairwoman Emily Convers and Mike Egan. Okay, guidelines. Presenters will be given 12 to 15 minutes to present. That's with the exception of the accountants because of the depth of material that you have to present, so you'll be given extra time. Written questions that were previously submitted will be read first and directed to the appropriate representative. Similar questions will be grouped together in order to prevent repetition and conserve time. All questions submitted are available for public review at Town Hall. Verbal questions will be taken from a sign-up sheet. Each person will have 3 minutes and must be a resident of the Town of Monroe. So you must be a resident, since this referendum is for the residents to vote on. You have to please state your name and address and state it clearly so that the stenographer can hear it. Those that have submitted written questions or asked questions verbally will not be allowed to do the same at the next meeting until all new questions have been heard. So in other words, if you've commented at this meeting, we have feedback there. George, you with us? All right. So if you've submitted questions at this meeting, people that have submitted new questions or want to speak first at the next meeting will go first, and if we have time, we will get to them. Speaking of time, this meeting will be capped at 10 p.m. That gives us 3 hours. I think that's more than an adequate amount of time. Hopefully it will be done before then, but if not, 10 p.m. will be the time. If we don't get to you on the list, then at that point, you'll be the first up at the next meeting. All right, the questions will be directed to the moderator and not to the panelists. So if you have a question, you're going to direct it to me, and I'm going to direct it to the appropriate person here on the panel. The right to the responders reserve the right to decline questions, and if that's the case, I will just move on to the next resident. As I stated previously, the stenographer is here. She can only listen to one person at a time, so please speak clearly, slowly, and let her get an accurate representation of what is said at the meeting, all right? 2 people cannot be speaking at the same time. Conduct. There's no signs, no shouting out, no interrupting presenters or speakers. I have directed the videographer to film any person who becomes disruptive, and I will use the video as evidentiary material for a criminal complaint. The Village of Monroe Police are on standby in the event that it becomes necessary to remove and/or arrest anyone that interferes with these proceedings. Hopefully that won't be the case. Hopefully people will be respectful of each other's right to speak, ask questions. This is an informational session, all right? And it's about primarily the voters and whether getting that information out and so that they are well informed come November 7th with the referendum. Okay, that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce Bill Cochran, Mike Turturro, and Linda Hannigan, and you're now going to present on behalf of your firm, RBT.
Testing. First off, if this goes blank, I keep hitting this button right here. I've already done it 3 times in practice. So. We are RBT CPAs out of Newburgh, New York. We have 4 offices throughout the Hudson Valley. And we were engaged by the town of Monroe to find out what is the impact of the formation of the new town. We call those agreed upon procedures. It's not an audit. We don't provide an opinion on it, but what we do is we gather information and then we tell you what we have learned. We're estimating the overall impact of revenues and expenses over the form of the town of Monroe. And again, this is not an audit. There are procedures that were agreed to between the town board and RBT. Revenues. What is the impact of revenues to the town of Monroe? What are you going to lose? Expenses. What can you save? When we were going through, we're developing a strategy to try to gather the information that we could for the revenues, is we do a lot of municipalities, but this is a slightly different. We had to dig a little bit deeper. You know, how was it done? So we had to do interviews. We interviewed state officials, county officials, other local officials, trying to get to the guts of how some of these calculations and amounts pass through your books of account. How is this revenue going in? And with those revenues going in, how are they going to be affected with this new town? With the expenses, we scrubbed the expenses, and we're looking at expenses. Okay, which ones most likely would there be savings due to the formation of this town? But in that essence, we had to interview the department heads. We had to interview employees. We had to perform walkthroughs. We had to see, okay, how is this working? How are these expenses being saved, right? So, but what we found is, we did a significant accounts. You know, the books of account of Town Monroe are huge, right? You've got hundreds of accounts. So instead of looking at every single account, we say, okay, let's put a dollar limit on it. Let's look at significant accounts that will have the biggest impact if this town is formed. Of course, property taxes is one, but there's other fines and forfeitures and other revenues that could be lost due to this. Sales tax is another. Expenses, we looked at approximately 87%, I would say, of all the expenses. There was, 87% significant. Your personal services and employee benefits made up over 50% of that 87%. So all the significant accounts we looked at, we found that personal services and employee benefits was your biggest number. Analysis of revenues. Now the next slide you're going to see, there's a list. You're going to see by fund, revenues that you're going to lose, estimate, by fund. And I'm not going to read every single one of them, but I'm going to touch on your most significant. A fund, your general fund. Real property taxes. Sorry about that. Told you. Use this one right here. Real property taxes. The impact estimated impact for the formation of the new town, you're going to lose out of the general fund approximately $918,000 of real estate taxes. You have a decreased population of assessed values now, right? You don't get to spread it out as much. That's why you have the decrease. Another one, state mortgage tax. As it states there, state mortgage tax varies considerably based on the economy. Good economy, more mortgage tax. Bad economy, less mortgage tax. So we couldn't guess what the economy is going to do in the future, so what we did is we took 2016 and came up with an estimated percentage calculation of what you could lose. And that came to $166,000. And there's a few other small differences there, but the total impact of revenue losses in the general fund is $1.2 million. Here we got listed the other funds, D fund, DA fund, DB fund. Property taxes, property taxes, property taxes. Sales tax, reduced population, less sales tax. But let me just hit you the totals here. Mortgage tax again, loss of $100,000 out of the B fund, $316,000 out of the DA fund, and $390,000 out of the DB fund. Smaller funds, there's only a loss of $2,000 out of these funds listed here. Overall, 16% of your revenues will be lost. $2 million of revenues lost. Estimated expense savings. Like I said, there's so many expense accounts to look at. So many details that you could dive into. So many guesses. There's a lot of what ifs. We didn't do any what ifs. There's a lot of what ifs. What we wanted to do was see if we could nail down expenses that, if you change them, you might have some savings. We couldn't make that decision. The town of Monroe has to make that decision. Significant expenses by fund. General fund, outside, highway, highway. Savings, $168,000. Why is it only $168,000? Because your department heads, the comptroller, as of now, do not plan on cutting personnel services and employee benefits at this time. That's why here, there's no savings there. You only have savings in other significant expenses, which is the other part. Here, a savings of $168,000. That's based on interviews and estimates from the officials that we interviewed during this process. Summary. What does it look like now and into the future if nothing changes? If everything stays the same, what happens? You got a negative effect. You got your savings there, your loss in property tax revenues that we went over, approximately $1.9 million net. What does that mean? That means that if you take all your fund balances, some will go negative quicker than others. But what we did was, since this is made up of all your funds, that $1.9 million in lost revenues net, in 3 years, with nothing changing, all your fund balances are wiped out. You're negative. What does that mean? Negative. Think of it personally. I have no cash to pay my bills. I got more bills than I do cash or revenues. So that would be something for you guys to think about. So what we did was estimated property tax increase based on the estimates, based on the interviews, based on the information that was provided to us. No what ifs, just the information that was provided to us. If you take an estimated home market value of $280,000 and you use assessed value using the current equalization rate of 19.5%, your assessed value is $54,600. Per thousand, it's $54.60. Our estimated tax increase for that home, you got two you got to think about. You got the town and you got the village, two different rates. Based on our information, you have an increase of 2.77. So your town estimated annual increase for that market value is $151 per year. The village, 2.67 rate increase, based on that market value, is $146. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cochran, while I have you here, there were a couple of questions that were submitted, pre-submitted in written format, and I'm going to ask you those questions now while we have you here on the floor, okay? All right, the first question was from Ed Capalco. He's a resident. And his question is, what is the effect of the current surplus fund balance on the town of Monroe?
Okay, so let's go to that last slide. We'll start there. All right. So you have surplus, and we're going to break down one of your most important ones, which is your general fund, because that's all unencumbered. Most of it's unencumbered, unrestricted, unassigned, whatever you want to call it, where most of your expenses and the operations of the town of Monroe go through. But just here, if we take all the funds, at 4.7, you got a surplus. If you keep going with that, again, in year 3, you're in the negative. Now let's think about that for a second. Let's go back to the first slide. Here, estimated change in revenues is $1.2 million. How much savings did we save from the A fund? 0. The fund balance right now for your general fund, your main unencumbered fund is $1.9 million. In a year and a half, you're wiped out.
Okay, the next question from that same resident is, how much will the loss of New York, and county sales tax revenue be? And I believe you covered that, but if you could just restate that.
Yes, sir, I'll point it out. So your sales tax revenue goes to your B fund and your DB fund. You have a reduced population, estimated, right? You're going to lose $87,000 in your B fund and $335,000 in your DB fund. So just over, what, $410,000.
Okay, the last question, this is from resident Christine Tucker. It's how much of an increase in property taxes can a resident in the town of Monroe see or expect?
Estimate.
And I believe that's
right there. Now, think about that rate increase there. These were off unaudited numbers. We use the AUD, which is your annual update document. That is submitted to the New York State Comptroller's Office every year. But they're unaudited. Those are the numbers we had to use, right? We had to use unaudited numbers. So this could change. Until you have audited numbers that somebody says, those are your numbers, then you can get a lot more accurate on what that rate increase is.
okay. Thank you. All right, thank you very much for your
No problem.
great slide presentation and answering the questions, and we'll be maybe calling on you in a little bit. Thank you.
Hey, no problem.
All right, thank you. All right, the next The next presenter was supposed to be the Monroe Woodbury School District. They have a meeting tonight, so what they did was submit a written response to the questions that were pre-submitted. As I go through each of those pre-submitted questions, I will give the district's response to the things that fall within their purview. All right, so the next presenters up are United Monroe. We asked United Monroe to be here because of their involvement with getting to this point with the Village of Curious Joel and this their negotiations, and we figured it would be prudent, and I think that's a lot of questions on people's minds is how those negotiations came about and what and what got to this point. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike Egan. Are you going to, or Emily?
Emily's going to start.
Emily's going to start. Okay.
Hi, I'm Emily Colbert. I just have a few short words, and then Mike Egan is going to give a presentation. I'm very proud of the volunteer work United Monroe and Preserve Hudson Valley have accomplished, and the milestones we've achieved since 2012 and 2014, respectively. I'm here tonight as a volunteer member of these grassroots organizations that had the leverage to negotiate less acreage in exchange for Curious Joel separation. The leverage we had in this process came from the volunteer work of hundreds of people, the support of thousands of citizens, and the leadership members of our executive committee. The leverage to negotiate also came from the litigation launched by the nonprofit organization Preserve Hudson Valley, to which I am one of 3 directors. And Curious Joel filed a petition to separate in 2016, September of 2016 specifically. In that original petition, Curious Joel was proposing to take 382 acres of Monroe land. United Monroe and Preserve Hudson Valley leadership negotiated that number down to 56 acres when you factor in that KJ won the 164-acre annexation lawsuit. And the 164 acres sits in Curious Joel right now as I speak. Again, I'm very proud of the results of this historic separation negotiation, and I look forward to sharing more details and answering questions this evening regarding the terms of the proposed separation. Thanks to the members of the town board who created the forum for this important Q&A.
Okay, and I'm Mike Egan. And what I'm going to do is take you through what is officially called the settlement agreement. And I'll explain why it's called settlement agreement as I do. But first, I think most of you know this, but if you don't know this, the agreement itself and a summary of all the key terms has been posted on United Monroe's website for 2 months. It was posted 2 months ago on the Times Held Records website. And then recently, the Photo News posted the key term summary. So if you want to read the agreement itself, it's been there, it is there, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. I'm not going to try and go through all the terms and conditions of the agreement here tonight. I think some of you might fall asleep because it's not that exciting, some of it, and some of it is more important than the others, so I'm going to hit all the most important points. Last year when KJ submitted its petition, what was called at that time North Monroe, to create a new town and take the 382 acres of land with it, to the surprise of many, including our friends, we as United Monroe stood up and said, yes, that's a great idea, but not at that price. It's too high a price. And we asked to have a seat at the table to try and negotiate a lesser price, lesser amount of land, and then we could support it and try and help pass it, which is exactly where we are now. We did accomplish that. And we did this because we had come to understand over the almost 5 years now, as Emily just told you, that separation, political separation was necessary. If the residents living outside of the village of Curious Joel, we're going to get out from under the block vote of Curious Joel, which cannot be overcome today. If Curious Joel votes as a block, they win, period. And it only grows more difficult because KJ's voters grow at 8% a year, and the rest of the town doesn't grow much. So we understood that that had to happen if there was going to be an independent Monroe outside of the village of KJ. And also, if we were going to end this just dysfunctional, debilitating fight for control of town government that's been going on here for years, and it's just been awful the last 5 or 6, and for Monroe to have a future. So that's why we jumped forward and said, we want to do this. And we were the only people that jumped forward and said we want to do this. Everybody had a right to do it. Everybody, whether you were elected, not elected, worked at the county, worked at this town, worked at any other town. You could have done it. Nobody stopped you. We just said we want to do it. And while it took 5 more months of lobbying and diplomacy by us, we did eventually get a seat at the table, and we began a direct negotiation with KJ in March. We did enlist the help of expert lawyers, as did KJ, but it was, it was direct. And it took us 5 more months then to negotiate the key terms of a comprehensive, what I call a peace treaty. And it's between KJ, the village of KJ, and United Monroe Preserve Hudson Valley. It's not with the town of Monroe. It's between these parties, right? And think of it as a skin with restrictions and obligations for those parties on top of KJ's Palm Tree petition. That's what it is, right? It's between private parties, Preserve Hudson Valley, United Monroe, and the village of KJ. No obligations or commitments are stated by United Monroe for the town, as has been claimed by some people. The obligations are all ours. We'll support this, we'll lobby for that, we'll do this, right? We won't oppose that. All to facilitate the creation of this town. That's what it's all about. Okay, so I'm going to go through it piece by piece here. The goals: political separation of Kira Scholl and the rest of the town of Monroe to allow each, and I do mean each, both sides, to control their destinies. Both sides are sick of fighting and wasting time, money on that at the cost of moving the town forward, like we see some of the other towns in Orange County and surrounding counties. And the dysfunctional struggle for control of town government and its powers over annexation, yes or no on annexation, zoning, appointments to boards, hiring, permits, and all other municipal resources. And importantly, remember to end litigations, because we've been in litigation, we meaning Preserve Hudson Valley, been in litigation for years, Okay. The major terms of this: school district protected. We knew, we live in this town, we are parents, we got kids in the schools, a whole organization does, we are you. We knew that school district being protected was of utmost importance. And unlike what the town board did in the annexation process, where they just said, don't worry about it, they'll change it, we said we're going to deal with it up front. And we actually made the agreement contingent on that had to be done before any votes were taken. It was a big gamble on our part. It was a huge gamble, right? But it happened. And both school boards, Monroe Woodbury and KJ, voted unanimously to change their boundaries upon commencement of Palm Tree. And then mutual support for Palm Tree, that United Monroe, Preserve Hudson Valley, and KJ will each advocate for the formation of the new town, and that it'll only consist of 56 acres, as Emily just explained so well to you. That's all we're talking about here, it's 56 acres. KJ is 900 acres today. We're adding 56 to it, that's it. And this is all the land KJ is getting via Palm Tree. That's it, 56 acres. 164-acre annexation was given to them, was granted by the previous town board. We've been fighting it in court, and that helped get the leverage to do this, right? But we lost, we're in appeal, and we're pursuing that, and if this doesn't go through, we'll continue it, but if it goes through, we settle it. So, upon approval, here's what happens. Lawsuits are settled. So KJ will discontinue its appeal of the 507-acre annexation decision. I don't know how familiar you are with this, but you remember KJ wanted 507 acres. United Monroe galvanized the public and was, virtually unanimous opposition to that by the non-KJ residents of this town. And that lobbying and that resistance forced KJ to compromise, and they put forth a 164-acre annexation petition that they knew that their people on our town board would approve as a sort of a face-saving device. And they did. But KJ immediately, after that decision there in September of 2015, immediately went to court and filed opposition, a challenge to the town's decision to deny the 507-acre, and that's still alive. And the county and the surrounding towns around here, the municipal coalition, has spent, I think, $400,000 is the number I've heard, fighting that, right? And fighting the 164. So that's alive. But by this palm tree, if this goes through, if you vote for this thing, KJ will withdraw its challenge. And presumably then, the court will dismiss that lawsuit, and we'll all, including this town, will no longer have to pay lawyers tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to write briefs and fight that. Nor will all these surrounding towns or the county that have, like I said, spent $400,000. That's just the beginning. So it's a huge plus. Moreover, that existential threat of 500 acres, or the difference between 300 and something acres going to KJ, and you see these high, 24 homes per acre going in this high density housing, it's off the table. It's done. It's a huge win. And we, meaning Preserve Hudson Valley, will discontinue our appeal of the 164-acre decision that the town of Monroe board made, the prior board, and KJ, when they both approved it. And that's what we've been fighting, and we agree that we'll drop that. We have some seeker-related claims to that. Without boring you to death, we'll drop those. B, KJ and Palm Tree will not encourage, sponsor, or do anything to facilitate annexations from Monroe or Blooming Grove into Palm Tree or into KJ for at least 10 years. I say for at least 10 years because it's for 10 years from the commencement of the town. If nothing changes and we just go according to state law, the town won't even commence for 2 years. So it's really, in that case, it would be 12. KJ and Palm Tree will not encourage, sponsor, or abet the formations of new villages in Monroe for at least 10 years. And the idea there, remember, the trouble with villages can be that they control their own zoning, right? KJ is a village in the town of Monroe today. They control their zoning. They want high-density zoning, right? And so they've agreed not to foment villages for that period of time. KJ and Palm Tree to remain coterminous, meaning they're the same for at least 10 years. KJ to take all actions necessary to ensure that it and Palm Tree comply with the agreement, that's our agreement, including detailed binding resolutions of compliance by both KJ and Palm Tree. This agreement was done with great scrutiny, great expertise to try and tighten it down on all parties that they have to live up to what they say they will do. The parties will ask the court when we're dropping those lawsuits, when we're discontinuing. We've already gotten, you can read it, we've written the stipulation of settlement that we're going to hand the court, the Supreme Court, Orange County Supreme Court judge, and say we want to settle our lawsuits. The two litigants agree on these terms and conditions and this agreement. And we're going to do that the day after the election if it's approved. And we're going to say we want to settle it on these terms. And these terms then are those that I just read you, all of those terms on these slides are in there. No annexations, no villages, all that stuff is in there. And we're going to ask the court to order it as a settlement, which is another level of binding power. Now, it's not just the parties who've agreed to this and have a contract, a binding contract. It's also the court is involved. The court is ordering these terms to settle it. Right? KJ to take all reasonable actions to expedite the commencement of Palm Tree after passage. So I told you that New York State law, Article 5, says if this thing is approved on November 7th, it actually doesn't commence for more than 2 years, January 1 of 2020. That's just the law. And what we said is, nobody's going to want to wait that long. So KJ has a lot of friends in Albany. We all know that. And so we said, well, it'd be smart to put in this agreement that KJ will use its friends, its power, right, to try and expedite this thing and try and make it happen faster. Maybe they can get home rule decision, local election, whatever, and make it happen faster. Fortunately then, after we announced the deal, and our neighboring Assembly District Representative, James Skoufis, he seized on that and he said, oh yeah, I like that. And I will tell you right now that I will try and move that legislation. So, there's an ardent supporter of that out there. So there are additional terms and conditions, and I'm happy to, go back to them if anybody wants, but they're lesser. And in the interest of time, I'm going to skip them for the moment. So I think that's it. Mike?
All right, thank you, Mr. Egan. Ms. Converes? Okay. All right, that concludes our presenters. At this point, I'm going to go through the pre-submitted questions that were submitted last week and direct them to the appropriate party. Okay, the first question is from resident Tom Lapola, and his first question is to be directed to United Monroe is, how does the clause in this agreement, which suggests a 10-year moratorium on future annexations, supersede New York General Municipal Law 703, which allows individual citizens the right to petition the government to annex lands from one territory to another? If this government does not prevent citizens from still petitioning the government, but prevents the new government from considering future annexations, let's see follow-up question. And do you want me to give you the follow-up question as well?
Well, I'll answer that one, and then you're going to want to read the follow-up question.
Okay.
Because the answer is it doesn't supersede it.
It doesn't supersede it. All right, so the follow-up question is, how does this agreement allow Palm Tree, a new municipality, to guarantee it will not consider all future citizens' requests for annexation for 10 years if they are unsure who the leaders will even be in 5 years? I guess who's going to be elected. More importantly, though, how can any government arbitrarily, without due consideration, deny future petitioners their rights guaranteed by state law?
Okay, so, this is one of these questions that's got just, inflammatory claims in it, so let me take them out first. No government is being asked to arbitrarily decide anything here, right? So, that's a prejudice in the question, and no petitioners have annexation rights guaranteed by law. Nobody has a right to that. You can petition for it, and this doesn't stop people from doing that. But to get to the heart of the question, I think what Lapola wants to ask is, how do we know that Palm Tree will do this, right? Will abide by this? I think is what the essence of the real question is. And his point is that it doesn't exist and blah, blah, blah. Well, remember that Palm Tree will be, 956 acres or something? 900 of which exist in KJ, and nobody lives in the other 56. So when the leaders of Palm Tree are elected, they'll be elected by Curious Joel, right? I mean, that's the answer right there. Curious Joel will be Palm Tree, and Curious Joel will do what it is bound to do. I'm trying to think of the rest of his questions here.
Would you like me to repeat it?
Oh, due consideration, yeah. So he says, how can they decide they're not going to annex without due consideration? Okay. KJ and Palm Tree were given, if this is approved, the town of Palm Tree is approved, the consideration will be given right there. And that's what this agreement says, if you've read it, and if you haven't, you should read it. It's very clearly written to say both parties, or all three parties really, recognize the benefit of this agreement, that there are tangible benefits being given to both sides here, right? And in KJ's case, it's a formation of a town and the 56 acres that go with it. That's their benefit. That's the consideration. So again, this question by Mr. Lapola is a prejudice question. That's the consideration. When Palm Tree is formed and its governors, its leaders are elected by Curious Joel, it and KJ will immediately pass resolutions, right, that are already worded. They're in the agreement that say we recognize that there is tangible public benefits being given here, and that this is in the public interest, and that annexing and anything less than 10 years is not in the public interest. Right? And so the public interest is being served through the living up to and abiding by the agreement to form the town of Palm Tree. So I think that's it, Mike.
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I had one more thing to add to that. The citizens in Curious Joel are also have this agreement available to them right now, as the citizens outside of Curious Joel do. And the leadership of Curious Joel have entered into this settlement, this legal settlement agreement. And the people of the entire town of Monroe on November 7th are going to vote yes or no on this referendum. Therefore, if this vote passes and the separation occurs, the people of Curious Joel, the citizens themselves, will have had their say in whether or not they agree with this separation and this settlement.
Okay, the next group of questions are from Ed Capalco, and I'll deal with the questions from the school district that were directed to the school district. I received the response from the school district just like at 5:30, so I'm kind of looking at these for the first time, but we'll read through them, so just please bear with me. Okay, the question number 2 from Mr. Capalco was, what are the religious private school tax exemption projections for the Monroe Central School District and the town of Monroe? The answer, I don't know if that's me or not. And the answer is, if we assume the alteration of school boundaries moves forward, presumably the majority of new development, including the properties eligible for religious exemptions, would occur on the 220 acres of the annexed territory. After the annexation, this property would no longer be part of the Monroe-Woodbury Central School District, and therefore these exemptions would no longer impact the school district. Development of religious properties outside the 220 acres is likely to be limited and accompanied by other non-tax exempt development, which would likely offset new exemptions. The local assessor may be the best position to identify the scope of religious exemptions within the village of KJ and determine if the composition of these religious exemptions is similar to the town of Monroe and the corresponding impact correspondingly the impact of annexation. Question number 3. What are the projected population demographics and what are the effects on the town of Monroe's, the Monroe-Woodbury Central School District tax bases? Our projections are calling for a vast majority of the development and population increases to occur within the 220-acre annexation territory. We believe high-density housing made possible by more permissible zoning within the newly annexed areas will result in a large influx of families with children, leading to a population density similar to that of the KJ Village. Population projections for 220 acres are approximately 13,409 people, of which 6,824 would be school-aged children. The estimate includes 6,757 students attending non-public religious schools, 63 students with disabilities attending the KJ Union Free School District programs, and 4 out of the district's replacements for students with disabilities. We estimate that the total school taxable assessed value for the 220 acres will increase from $6,616,300 to $43,830,600 after full build-out for development. This indicates a loss of tax revenue or approximately $5,832,174 after the annexation area is fully developed. However, the loss of this tax revenue must be weighed against new costs associated with providing mandatory services to thousands of resident students attending non-public schools and special education placements, which will far surpass revenue losses. Question number 4, will there be school inspections, I guess from the school district, will there be school inspections for private schools in the town of Monroe by the Monroe Woodbury School District for state education requirements and Monroe building inspectors for any safety CO issues? Monroe Woodbury Central School District will continue to monitor non-public schools and programs that receive federal funding in accordance with state and federal guidelines. Number 5, is a award system for the Monroe Woodbury Central School District going to be pursued? And the answer is no, there are currently no plans for such a system. Okay, now the questions that are not related to the school district from that resident is how many wells are owned and controlled by KJ and Palm Tree? Pierce Joel's not here, so I can't, they're located in the town of Woodbury or Monroe. I don't have the answer for that. I know there's 3, at least 3 here in the town of Monroe. I'm not sure how many are in Woodbury. Number 7 is what are the future plans for increasing the water and sewer capacity requirements? Sewer capacity requirements are a county thing, and water is specific to the development. Question number 9 from the resident is the new town of Palm Tree going to recycle? Again, Curious Joel is not here, so I can't answer that question. Okay, number 10 is how is the new proposed town of Palm Tree and the village of KJ going to react when citizens act in New York State law and request to be annexed? And again, they're not here, and I can't answer that question. And answer number 11 is what is the future of the town hall buildings? And I'll direct that to Tony Cardone since he's handling that for the town board.
Okay, so presently we have an agreement in place with Etz Chaim, and we're looking to purchasing the building. Right now, we're awaiting a response from the owner's attorney, Ben Ostra, because they had to file with the Attorney General, Mr. Nugent. It was the Attorney General or there were 2 people they had to file with. I'm at a loss right now. Because they're a nonprofit, they had to file for approval to sell the building to the Attorney General or...
It's actually either or, the Attorney General or the Supreme Court.
Or the Supreme Court. Okay, right, because they had to authorize that. As far as the Old Town Hall, 11 Stage Road, right now, McGooey, Hauser, and Etzel is compiling a list of items that would give us the ability to go out and make the corrections to the mold issue that was already remediated, but we want to make sure we make the corrections so that in construction, so that the mold is totally remediated. And as far as the courts go, I met with McGooey, Hauser, and Etzel last week, the John DeAngelis building. They're in the process of trying to obtain a grant to possibly do some renovations there. We're in a catch-22 there, based on the way I feel about it, because right now we're so close to buying the building of Etz Chaim, and the courts could be situated within that building, that rather than spending the money, additional money associated with the improvements along with the grant, we would want to put that into the Etz Chaim building where the courts could be held.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the next group of questions are from resident Mary Bingham. And the first question is, what is the impact going to be on the current highway department staffing? And the answer to that is until we're going to have to look at the budget losses. We saw what the numbers were here tonight, and that's something we'll have to consider as with all departments going forward as we go into the next year. Question number 2 is, will the proposed town of Palm Tree have its own dog shelter? Again, there's no one here from Curious Joel. I believe that by New York State town law, they are required to provide dog control services. And so that's going to be up to them how they handle that. Question number 3 is, will the proposed town of Palm Tree have its own court, or can they contract with the town of Monroe to use its own courts? Again, they're not here. Mr. Nugent, is it legal with the New York State town law for another town to contract with an adjoining municipality to provide court services?
I believe that initially they could contract. Typically, a town would have its own court, but clearly when it's first established, they're not going to have one. So the matters could be handled with the town of Monroe, or, you know, even in the village if it has its own court initially.
Okay, thank you. Question number 4 is, will the town of Monroe still need a human resources department, and will the town of Palm Tree need a human resources department? Again, that kind of dovetails with question number 1 as far as the town of Monroe goes. We're gonna have to look at our entire budget, all our assets, all of our personnel, and determine where we need to make cuts. As far as the town of Palm Tree, whether they're gonna need a human resources department, that's up to them. That's not something we have a say over. Will the current, question number 5, will the current assessors department do the assessments for both towns? I can't answer that question. I know we'll still do them for Monroe, and if they would like to enter into an IMA, it's something we would certainly entertain going down the road. Okay, Brock Witham is the name of the resident. He had one question, is what is the realistic cost of the separation? I believe most of those, that question's kind of broad, and I think most of it was addressed by the presentation by RBT, the CPAs from RBT. All right, I have another question. It's from Tom LaPola again, and this is going to be directed to United Monroe. And the first question is, why were certain areas removed from the original town request? I understand when the parties thought the original 382, and I assume acres is what that's supposed to read, request was too much, and they said no. What exactly did they consider too much? Too many citizens leaving, too much land, too much taxes to be lost to Palm Tree. And then there's a B to that. Has the village of KJ sought special consideration for a group of people excluded from the town of Palm Tree? If so, what will that consideration be?
Since the initial annexation petition was filed at the end of 2013 for 507 acres, I think most of the town of Monroe citizens outside of Curious Joel have been opposed to large tracts of land being taken from Monroe for high density housing. And it's 382 acres is pretty close to the original 507 acres that we had been opposing since 2013. And although the 382 would have been part of a new town and would not be block voting in our town with a separation, 382 acres of high density housing and serious development going on would have a tremendous impact on the quality of life of the citizens in Monroe, and which is the primary reason why I objected to 382 acres. But to answer the other questions, too many citizens leaving, I don't really know what that means. Too much land, yes, I think too much land. Too many taxes to be lost to Palm Tree. I think after seeing the auditing firm's presentation, I think we can imagine what 382 acres of land leaving would do to our tax base. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. And question number 2 from Mr. LaPola, and this is a legal question. I'm just gonna, I might ask the attorney to opine on it. Do all the parties, including Monroe, have a contingency plan if the U.S. Supreme Court rules that the town of Palm Tree to be unconstitutional? And how, if all, will it impact our town? And Palm Tree is dissolved, will KJ possibly reincorporate back into the town of Monroe as a village, creating a much broader long-term problem?
I'll say that if a matter reached the United States Supreme Court on that issue, there would be more than sufficient time for any contingency planning, if in fact that happened, but it's extremely speculative, so there's really, nothing that would be put in place at this time for something that would be so far down the road, and speculative as to whether it would succeed, if an action was brought.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nugent. The next set of questions is from resident Lorraine Lowing, and the first question is, I'm going to do Ms. Lowing had two questions for the school district, two that they answered, so I'm going to do those two questions first. Questions for the town and school board. If tax revenues are reduced, services will have to be cut or taxes raised. Can you tell us if services need to be cut, which ones are highest on the list of being cut? And if you're going to give us a sense of scale of the cut, example, 3 highway personnel or 4 special ed teachers. I'll just address the personnel from the town perspective. Again, these are things we're going to have to look at the board going forward, the new board next year, at these impacts based upon the financial presentation we just saw this evening, and figure out where we need to make those cuts. As far as the school district, their answer is, currently the district has no plans to cut programs due to the potential creation of the town of Palm Tree. Although in the short run, a decrease of the tax base will occur, corresponding cost savings changes will occur, resulting in an estimated net loss to the district of approximately $343,860. This amount will be offset by a combination of ordinary cost-saving measures, closure to the Harriman Center, reduction of the energy consumption district-wide, through the implementation of the district energy savings program, and offsetting increase to tax rates. And question number 3 was, question for the school district. How does the formation of Palm Tree save the school district? How is the town of Palm Tree formation expected to impact Monroe-Woodbury school enrollment numbers moving forward? And the answer is, the formation of the town of Palm Tree maintains the course of action established decades ago with the creation of the KJ Union Free School District. This course of action enables KJ and the surrounding community to pursue their way of life and avoid unproductive conflict and interference from the other. Furthermore, the school district will be able to maintain board control, which may not be the case if KJ residents began to buy property and reside within the school district. In the absence of boundaries alterations, this is more likely to occur. The formation of Palm Tree should have a very limited impact on the enrollment of Monroe-Woodbury Central School District. The anticipated enrollment, which has declined slightly in the last 7 to 8 years, we anticipate enrollment, which has declined slightly in the last 7 to 8 years, to begin to increase modestly. Okay, that's the school district questions, and I believe that answers all the questions from Ms. Loman. All right, I'm sorry, question number 2, which I didn't cover, is questions for KJ, which is not present, but I'll put the question out there anyway. If the new town is set up with the principles of open government being followed, including a website with agendas and minutes and meetings in English, will the town courts be established under the New York State Unified Court System? Again, Pierce Joel's not here, the representatives are not due to the holiday, but I can tell you that any court that's set up has to be set up under the New York State Unified Court System.
They will be here next week, though, won't they?
I'm sorry?
The KJ representatives, will they be here next week? At next
We hope
week's
so.
session?
We
Okay.
hope so, I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Okay, the next question is from Michael Kraposky. And the question is, will the town of Palm Tree build, or will the town and village of Monroe push for a direct access to Route 17? the Quickway to avoid the burden of the Village Monroe residents in Scunamunk Street, Franklin Avenue, and Forest Avenue as a principal access to the Quickway. I don't have an answer for that question. I don't know if anyone else on the board does as well. So the only traffic relief plan that was out there, kind of relevant to this long before it came to be in existence, was the Larkin Drive extension, and that's been stalled for quite a while. So, but that's, I can't answer that question. I don't believe any of us can either. Next question is from Michael Goldstein. I would like to know what date the town of Palm Tree will become an actual town. So according to Mr. Nugent, feel free to jump in if I'm incorrect. So the date by current New York State law that they could become a town would be on January 1st, 2020, and that would be following the next townwide elections in 2019, in November of 2019. You heard Mr. Egan say that they're going to look to push up that schedule somewhat, but as current New York State law stands, that would be January 1st, 2020.
Can I interject? In November of 2019, that would be the new town of Palm Tree's first election
Correct.
for
Their
their
board would be
own
set.
town board.
Right, and they would come into existence on 1/1/2020. Okay, the next set of questions is from Ward Brower. They're all directed to the Village of Kirs Joel, and but I'll read through them anyway, just so they are out there and on the record. Will the new town government of Palm Tree be created prior to the new town's formation? That was question one. Number two is, will the government be selected or elected? Number three, will there be regularly scheduled meetings? Number four, will the meetings be televised? Number five, will the town board members' terms be staggered? And number six, will the public concerns, will there be public concerns or privilege of the floor? Again, they're not here to answer those questions, but if they have a representative here next week, we will reread those at that time and try to get answers for you, Mr. Brown. Next set of questions are from Christine Tucker, and I think I'm going to go through your school board questions first, and then I'll jump back to the ones that relate to the town. Okay, how much of an increase in property taxes can the residents of Monroe expect? And I think this, I don't know if this was directed, you got the answer up here from the accountants, but this is relevant to the school taxes. The district estimates a typical resident with a market value of $275,000 would see a $21 annual increase in school taxes. That assumes the full net loss in tax revenue manifests itself in a tax increase and not new targeted cost saving measures. Number two, what is the per pupil cost of students in the town of Monroe but not attending the Monroe Woodbury Central School District, busing, special services as examples? The district does not maintain or analyze per pupil spending by town. Furthermore, the analytical approach used by the district focuses on costs associated with the annexation territory, not district-wide analysis. Question number three, how will Monroe Woodbury Central School District address the reduction in enrollment in the district? As enrollment declines, the cost to taxpayers will increase to keep all buildings open. Has the Monroe Woodbury Central School District considered closing a school building to reduce the cost to taxpayers? And the answer is, as part of the district's long-range facilities plan, we have been considering all options, including closing and/or leasing one or more academic or non-academic buildings. The guiding principle for the district is doing what is best interest for students and families while balancing a cost-effective and efficient school and building operation. And question number four is, how much of an increase in school taxes can a resident in the town of Monroe expect? And I believe that's a repeat of the first question, which is really about town taxes. The district estimates that the typical residents with a market value of $275,000 will see a $21 annual increase. Okay, now to address the other questions. All right. Question number two is, what services will be reduced or cut for the residents in the town of Monroe? I think that's already been answered, but I'll just put it out there again. That's a matter of future discussion with the town board and future budgets and deciding, where we're going to make cuts across the entire budget. How will the town of Monroe address the loss of mortgage tax collected due to the fact that most, if not all, the growth is in KJ?
I lost you, Mike, sorry.
I'm sorry.
How will the town of Monroe?
How will the town of Monroe address the loss of mortgage tax collected due to the fact that most, if not all, the growth is in KJ? And again, that's going to come down to budgeting and making cuts where we need to make them. But it should be noted that there will be building outside of the town of KJ and the areas as seen on the by some of the developments that are currently on paper. So there won't be like there'll be no mortgage tax coming in. There is development planned in town. Number 8 is a duplicate. Number 9 is on the November ballot. Is the only item being voted on is the request to separate? I believe yes, unless there's other referendums on the ballot. I believe there are.
There's
Yeah.
other referendums.
There are other referendums.
This
but-
will be the 4th referendum.
Right. Okay. If the separation request is supported and passes, what steps has the town board discussed to secure the future revenue in the community? Again, we're gonna have to look at everything and where we can make cuts, and we're gonna have to look at anticipated revenues coming in from new building and other sources. So that's again something we're gonna have to address down the road. And that concludes the pre-submitted written questions by the residents.
Hey, Mike, could I add one bit of information that the school board released, but wasn't in what you just read there? You addressed that in the first year, the cost of Palm Tree to the school district by losing that territory will be $342,000 on a $162 million budget, which is, 0.3%, and will cost the average taxpayer, who now pays $6,000, cost them $21. But what Elsie forgot to put in there is that they also calculated by the third year, it actually reverses, and Palm Tree begins to save the school district $2 million a year, and it escalates from there. So,
All right, I'm just going by what they submitted, so, going by their responses. Okay, first resident is Ed Capalco. I understand you're here. I'll grab you last because you did your written responses, but I will get to you. No worries. Our first resident up is Dan Burke. Dan? Actually, there's a mobile mic coming, Dan. You don't have to come down if you don't want
I
it.
can do it right from here, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this, Mr. Burke, is this a question or a
Yes,
statement?
it'll be a question.
Okay.
This is like Jeopardy, right? And all the answers have to be in the form of questions. Is the town board considering getting a second opinion on the mortgage tax? Our accounting here presented it as based on economic ups and downs. In the village of Curious Joel, it's not based on economic ups and downs. It's based on new families being formed. It is 400 to 500 a year. So that's why they pay so much more taxes. And he went to 2016. He should go back 10 years, 20 years even, and look for the averages and get a more accurate figure. So the question is, will you ask for a second opinion? Let me also say, this is a great
Let me
opportunity.
answer your first question. I'll answer the first question.
This comes out of my 5 minutes?
Let me answer your first question. I'm not putting a time limit on you right now.
Okay.
Statements will be 3 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so to answer your first question is, this is a preliminary assessment that we've done. If we feel that we need to do something more in-depth in the way of mortgage tax, we will. Again, we anticipate, and no, there's no way of knowing how many units are gonna be built in the future, but there will be units coming online in the town. It's just inevitable. So, and that'll be something that we'll have to look at as it goes.
And thank you, and it could be more accurate instead of going back 1 year, go back 10 years. So,
I'm sure they use their best practices.
Okay,
Go ahead with your
let me
second
ask
question.
let me ask an additional question. Is everybody aware that this is a great opportunity because the question has already been decided? The voting in November, Curious Joel, the Anash is going to vote for it. United Monroe is supporting it. It's going to be overwhelmingly. So is everybody aware that we're able to discuss this and talk about it without any kind of pressure or worries, because it's already decided. I'm sure everybody's aware of that. And
All right, I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
excuse me one second.
Yes.
All right, I don't, is there a question into this,
Yes.
or?
Are you aware of that?
I'm not quite sure what that,
Okay.
that people can discuss it, yes, people can discuss it. All right, go ahead, do you have another question?
Are you aware that I'm going to vote for it?
That's up to you. You're a voter, you can vote for whatever you want.
I
One more question, please.
I got a few more questions. I saw in the presentation that the highway contract is not going to be pursued. The town of Monroe, have you taken a look at the possibility of talking with the Palm Tree and trying to write a new contract? You're gonna need the revenue.
Don't believe everything you read in the papers. What's your next question?
The town needs the revenue, and Palm Tree
No offense, Bob.
they haven't set up their own snow removal system, and it makes sense for them to use ours, and it would keep our DPW, our highway department working all winter. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well,
Anyway.
we'll talk to the superintendent, and it's going to be his decision on whether it's a good idea or not.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are you considering, now that half the population of the town of Monroe is leaving,
I
consolidate?
think that's highly speculative, but if you just
Okay.
want to ask a question based on what you
Yeah.
currently know, that's,
Okay.
this isn't about politics, this is about questions. Please ask your question.
That was a clause, it wasn't a full question. So, have you considered consolidating the village of Monroe, the village of Harriman, and the town outside the villages into one unit? This would be, it might be a way that you can adjust your budget, and instead of having 3 public works departments, you'd have 1. Have you considered
Consolidation of
that?
services is always something that's on the
Oh,
agenda.
okay, thank you. The surplus is, it's not surplus actually, it's a reserve of $4,749,000. And the presenter from the accounting office said that they're looking to burn through it in 3 years. Is this a recommendation from them? And is our town board determined to hang on to that surplus or that reserve?
You know, I'm gonna give this to Mr. Cardone, since he's been dealing with that
Okay.
aspect of this.
That wasn't a recommendation, that was the numbers that were stated, and that's what would happen if we did absolutely nothing. If we just dealt with those numbers that were there. And that 4.7 million,
Yeah.
only 1.9 of it approximately is not encumbered. So that's essentially what we have to spend. The balance of that is encumbered by districts, water districts, sewer districts.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, the presentation was actually passive, so, and it's a starting point. Is the town board going to use that as a starting point and try to do something positive about, preserving the budget as much as possible? And that's more rhetorical than anything else.
Of course, we're gonna look at this and try to make cuts where we can and do what we can. It's a fiduciary responsibility, that's what we're elected to do.
Yeah, and if, are we considering 11-stage road of making sure that the cost of renovating it is compared to the cost of the price that it could sell for, and so we don't blow money on that? And another thing.
Do you want an answer to that question?
No. No, you'll consider it going forward, I'm sure.
Do it, Alex.
You'll tell me next week, fine.
We'll make a responsible decision based on what the costs are versus
Thank you.
value.
Yeah, that's what I expect, sure. And I didn't see anything in this presentation about the purchase of Itsheim. There's $2.7 million, and it should be worked into this kind of a presentation. If we're going to commit and do it, are you considering working it into this presentation on the 18th? And you can wait till the 18th to respond.
All right, Mr. Burke, I'm going to have this be your last question. so
Oh, okay.
Please.
Oh, yeah, any questions that were submitted could be put up on the screen. It would have been much more dramatic. And maybe by the 18th, we could do it. They're submitted days in advance, and you might consider that.
That's a good
And it
suggestion.
would make
We'll
a
take that
better
into
presentation. And I had a couple of other questions, but I'll wait until the 18th.
Feel free to write them down and send them a word.
This is more
You can-
fun. This is more fun.
Whatever you want to do, Mr. Burke. Okay, next resident is Kate Triano.
A few questions. What is the vote in November? Sorry, not that one. Why is the agreement made during a countywide election year? Why is this being rushed through during a town of Monroe election year? The long-term economic effects seem rather fuzzy still. We're losing $2 million a year. KJ appears to be getting a free ride. What are the long-term environmental impacts? Air, water, traffic, impermeable surfaces, carbon footprint, aquifers. Orange County, there were no studies done by the county. No studies will be done by the county. There was also the elected officials in the town of Monroe were kept out of the process completely. Pretty much unheard of when forming a new town for the first time in 120 years.
I just, Ms. Triano,
Orange
just want to let
County
you know that
agreements
there's-
to cut
Ms.
down
Triano,
on
there's,
massive social service dependency by KJ
clock
Palm
is
Tree.
running on your
Is there
questions.
anything at all? County budget effects by Palm Tree. Apparently we have nobody here from the county, and we have nobody here from the village of KJ. Since it's kind of like having a wedding without the bride here. Is KJ here? Will they come here? What about representatives from Orange County? It seems like the belief is everything will be fine. United Monroe, what happened? Will there be no more voter fraud, no more environmental abuses in KJ, no more welfare fraud, no more Medicaid fraud, no more food stamp fraud, open government in KJ? Will that happen now? It just seems this whole thing is very incomplete. There has been a great deal of verbiage, but I personally feel very confused by this. It seems like we're going to have an increase in taxes of $521. I'm sorry, that sounds a little bit low. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, Councilman Jerry McQuaid.
I just want to make some comments, questions you'll be looking at next week, because I've been listening to what's going on here tonight. So start the clock.
It started.
Annexation, thank you. Keep the money for the town of Monroe taxpayers. The annexation was the best deal we had. Now we're going to lose $2.8 million a year every year from now on. It's not just a one-year deal. Palm Tree, 220 annexed acres, not 56 as UM claims. It's 220 acres, plus the original 1,000 acres. So it's not a town of 56 acres. Lawsuit settled. KJ won the lawsuit. They were probably going to win an appeal, and UM Preserve Hudson Valley didn't want to pay for it, so they made a deal. I get it. KJ and Palm Tree, annex promises are not legally binding, not in the least. KJ and Palm Tree can't be legally bound to no village formation. The KJ Alliance is the group that's going to come out and make village formations in the town. KJ and Palm Tree, 10 years goes by quickly. Why not 25 years or 50 years? KJ does not control the alliance. The new villages are coming, and that's unavoidable. And I'm not even going to blame that all on United Monroe, but I'm just saying we got to be honest about it. What does the non-Hasidic population get for this deal? Tangible benefits. Voting issues, that's against the Voting Rights Act anyway. That's going to be challenged in court. KJ never wanted to be part of the Monroe-Woodbury School District. They never had to be given their own town to get out of the school district. They don't want to pay the taxes. Palm Tree, not 56 acres, going over that again. KJ has never been their own town. UM has been disingenuous about this. We did not annex them into being their own town. They got 164 acres, period. not 220. Rezoning of the town, that's gonna go on with the new town board, or the current town board. Certain members of it are already in agreement as far as I can see. 150 acres will go from 1 unit per lot to 4 units per lot. That's already primarily owned by the KJ Alliance. 450 more acres soon to be rezoned as the KJ Alliance buys the land. One unit per lot to 4 units per lot. I know it's not as dense as KJ, don't tell me that, I know it. But it's a lot more dense than it is for everyone else. UM claimed KJ is an unconstitutional theocracy. It's in their lawsuits. I guess if you become a town, you're not unconstitutional anymore. Let's see. Mayor Purcell and I have talked in the past. He told me several times that we have to look out 50 to 70 to 100 years. There's been no long studies here. I'd like, eventually Mr. Purcell can answer to that. Why is KJ getting a free ride? We should get at least $2 million a year or $3 million a year out of KJ for the next 50 years so we don't have to pay for it. I'm not against the concept of separation totally, but I will say KJ should pay for it. They're not even here to answer the questions. And then Mike doesn't even know if they'll be here next week. KJ will control the local elections for now and 2 years from now, as they will control the county elections this November, which is why there was an 18-3 vote done real quick with no studies. Let's be real what's going on here. I'm not saying they shouldn't have political power like any other big block vote, but they definitely have exercised it, and we should all be honest about what's going on here. What happened to the KJ voter fraud which Preserve Hudson Valley sued over? I guess they're allowed to vote in this election.
Time,
because we don't know
please.
where it's going. Thank you for the time.
You're welcome. Next speaker, John Allegro.
Before I begin, I was wondering if the stenographer wanted to rest her fingers for a minute.
You're using your time, go ahead.
Okay.
Is this I'm sorry, is this a question or a...
Well, I do have one comment, but I have a couple of questions. The one comment is that KJ will not be, if Palm Tree is passed, KJ will not be voting in the 2019 Monroe Town Board elections. My question, first question is for Bill from the accounting firm. Is he still here?
No, they're gone.
Okay, well, hopefully, maybe Tony can answer that, Mr. Cardone can answer this. You know, it's a rather dramatic statement at the end of his summary page in the presentation, which says, if nothing changes, fund balance will be wiped out in 3 years. And then on the next page, we see, I'm sorry about that. On the next page, we see estimated annual increase of a town outside the village home property taxes of $151 and an estimated annual increase of $145 in the villages. I think we need to clarify and draw a bridge here between, build a bridge between these two pages. I believe what Bill was saying was this is doing something, meaning an estimated annual increase of a $280,000 fair market home of $151 would alleviate that presumed $1.8 million annual loss. Is that correct?
That's the way I understood it.
Microphone, please.
I will get clarification from him, but that's exactly how
Right.
I understood
Hey,
it.
can you get that on the mic there, Mr. Cardone? Thank you.
John, that's exactly how I understood it. I will get clarification from him right now. I'm gonna call him right now. But I will say that he was specifying if absolutely nothing was done
Right.
at that point. And then he went to the next page. So let me call him now.
Yeah.
I'll get that answer for you.
Great, so for about $13 a month or $12 a month, people of Monroe have their political freedom. My other question was for the town board, for Tony, I guess, or you, Mr. McGinn. Are we considering the potential build-out with the zoning changes? I believe that there's the potentiality for about 180 new homes to be built in suburban residential zoning, should the town board pass the new comprehensive plan and zoning laws. what kind of revenue, tax revenue, can the town anticipate from that build-out, which would alleviate the presumed $1.8 million per year loss?
Okay, to answer that question, obviously, if there's several hundred homes currently on paper, as those homes are built and come online after the moratorium is lifted and the master plan, after the master plan is passed and the moratorium is lifted, we'll have to see. We don't know what the timeline is on, so I can't say, that's going to happen for the next fiscal year, or the following. That's going to be over, say, 5 fiscal years, 6 fiscal years, however long it's going to take for these developments to be built. So it's hard to say, and that's going to be something that's really going to come down to each budget year as we kind of estimate what's coming in based on the assessor and what we know is actually being built. As we've seen in the past, a lot of these developments sit on paper for decades and never make it to fruition for a variety of reasons. So we'll just have to wait. That's going to be a budget year by budget year thing that this board and future boards will have to look at.
Well, I guess, would it be fair to think?
Your time's up, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I answer that quick?
Yeah, you can answer the second part of the question.
That $145 or $151 increase covers the deficit. The only thing he added was that it will fluctuate based on the assessed value.
Hey, can I have the mobile mic down here for Mr. Capalco? He's up for answering. Oh, you can give him that one, that's fine, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Basically 2 questions. One, I wanted to clarify my first question about, the fund balance. I wanted to basically know, is KJ entitled to any of that surplus fund balance? All right, that's the first question.
Okay.
That was not covered by the accountants. And I do have another question here. This is directed to UM.
Do you want him to? I'll have him answer that first question about what the fund balance is or what KJ's entitled to. Yeah, sure.
You know what? Give me 1 second.
All right, you want to do your second question? We'll jump back to the
All
first
right,
one.
second question is directed towards United Monroe. Does any board member of Preserve Hudson Valley or committee member have any financial incentive to support the creation of the new proposed town of Palm Tree?
No.
What do you say? The question goes to me, and then I'll direct it to you.
All right.
Is there any financial risk to these parties if the new town does not pass?
Okay, I will direct that to United Monroe.
Thank you. No and no.
Okay, Tony, you can be able to answer the question about the fund balances?
Okay, with regard to the fund balances, this was a response from the accountants today because I asked that question earlier this morning. Years of plus and minus fund balance would take a good amount of time to determine who is entitled to what amounts. The debt taken out while the village was within the town will need to be paid, and since the village is leaving part of the town when debt was incurred, future payments would need to be deducted from any fund balance based on what they're entitled to, as they say. This is all up for negotiation as well, and we will have negotiations with the village of KJ, and it is in our best interest to maintain as much of our fund balance as we can. That's what our intentions are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, being no other residents have signed up, all the written responses have been answered. I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. We'll be having another meeting next Wednesday on the 18th, and same time, same place, and look forward to you coming out then.